Hi everyone, welcome to bonniecarollee Makes Cards. Today's cards feature Simon Says stamps, die-cut sentiments on Distress Oxide inked backgrounds. 3 of the cards use a masking technique while the other 2 are stenciled. The first thing I did was ink all 5 backgrounds. For this diagonal striped background, I began by applying a layer of tumbled glass as a base. I selected different widths of washi tape that I would use for masking. Starting with the widest, I laid out the washi tape diagonally, just eyeballing it across my panel. I then applied a layer of cracked pistachio. Something I should have mentioned, I laid out my inks so that they would be lightest to darkest, applying the lightest first. The wide inked stripes were then divided using my thinnest washi tape. Cracked pistachio was then applied. Before applying my final color, all the washi tape was removed. A stripe of blueprint sketch was applied down the middle of the wide stripe of tumbled glass. Before this final inking, I did have to do a little fix-up with one of the stripes that were done in the cracked pistachio to make it uniform with the rest of the stripes. The fun part of inking with masking is the reveal. My second card features vertical stripes. I began with a base of shaded lilac. Distress Oxide inks have good coverage, but by going lightest to darkest, I am mostly able to preserve the original color of the ink. The stripes were applied in this order: Seedless Preserves, followed by Mermaid Lagoon, and finally Chipped Sapphire. The darker stripes in this background were applied only to the area that had shaded lilac. The washi tape was simply moved to cover the stripe of the last color applied. This masking technique produces stripes that are pretty uniform in size. After the chipped sapphire was applied, the panel was left to dry completely and I moved on to my third background. I wanted each of the backgrounds to be different not only in color but in layout, so this one features horizontal stripes. The base for this panel was inked with scattered straw. The masking was done the very same way as the previous card. The same width of washi tape was used throughout. I eyeballed the width of the stripes as I laid down the tape. The first color I applied for this background was dried marigold. The washi tape was moved to cover this stripe before applying my next color, fossilized amber. This step was repeated, and the final color that was applied was abandoned coral. The last 2 backgrounds for this series were created using stencils. The bokeh background was created with a handmade stencil using a sheet of mylar and several sizes of circle punches. Using the same principle of inking lightest to darkest, I began with a base of Victorian velvet on my panel. Various sizes of circles were randomly inked on the panel. Some overlapped each other. I continued until I was happy with the result using worn lipstick, shaded lilac, and wilted violet. For my final background, I stenciled a variety of sizes of stars. I began with a base of ice spruce. I then stenciled my stars using peacock feathers, pine needles, and chipped sapphire. I needed a masculine birthday card, so I chose the colors with this in mind. The inked backgrounds for all of these cards was very quick and easy. The stenciled backgrounds were the faster of the 2 though. Precision is not the concern when layering on shapes. Attention is only required to the distribution of the colors across the panel and the sizes of the stars. I continued to layer on the stars until I was happy with that balance. I took care of a little bit of ink smudging with my creative detailer. Now to turn those backgrounds into cards. For the diagonal stripe card, I am featuring Simon Says Stamps Big Thank You. I began by die cutting Thank You out of the panel and then taking the panel and attaching it to an A2 sized card base. The scripty words Thank You were embossed with clear sparkly embossing powder. I also cut Thank You out of Simon Says Stamps Blue Violet cardstock. The clear embossed striped script was attached to the blue violet cardstock, slightly offsetting it. The words were then inlaid on the card. A secondary sentiment, "A friend is one of the greatest gifts in life," from Simon Says Stamps Say It All Friend, was stamped in VersaFine ink. The card was embellished with Nouveau Crystal drops, Duck Egg Blue, Caribbean Ocean, and Midnight Blue. The vertically striped card features Simon Says Stamps Miss You. The shadow die from this set was used to die cut the lower right-hand corner of the panel. This die was also used to die cut Simon Says Stamps Soft Navy cardstock. The striped text was adhered to the shadow with a little bit of glue. After the panel was adhered to the same soft navy cardstock used for the shadow die cut, it was adhered to an A2 sized card base. After the sentiment was inlaid, a few sequins embellished the card. The sequins were enhanced with the addition of Nouveau Crystal Drops Morning Dew. The third card in this series features Simon Says Stamps Hello Crafty Friend. I began by attaching Simon Says Stamps Sunshine cardstock to an A2 sized card base. The panel was die cut with the shadow die and attached to the base. To keep everything level, the shadow was also die cut from Sunshine cardstock and inlaid in the panel. This also allowed me to easily inlay some of the striped background pieces that helped define the script. After the sentiment was adhered to the shadow, the card was embellished with a few sequins. The sequins were topped up with Nouveau Crystal Drops Morning Dew. Morning Dew dries clear and really enhances the overall look of the embellishment. The backgrounds for the final two cards are stenciled rather than masked. This birthday card has a masculine feel and features Simon Says Stamps Birthday Wishes. I began this card by die cutting the stenciled panel with Pink Fresh's Pretty Frames. The small panel with its rounded corners was mounted on black sheet foam and attached to Simon Says Stamps Soft Navy cardstock. Making sure the patterns were aligned, the two outer frames were then adhered to the panel. The circular sentiment Birthday Wishes was die cut from Simon Says Stamps Soft Navy cardstock. I also die cut this sentiment in light blue to use as the background, but I found it was a bit too bright and ended up changing it to a patterned paper. I simply just lined up the patterned background over top of the light blue and adhered it. My final card features Simon Says Stamps Script Hello and Mod Circle frame. I began by die cutting the panel with the Mod Circle frame and then taking the frame and embossing it with clear sparkle embossing powder. The frame was then attached to an A2 sized card base. The die cut pieces were then inlaid back onto the card, much like putting a puzzle together. The scripty Hello and its coordinating shadow die were both die cut from Simon Says Stamps Cotton Candy cardstock. To define the hello from its background, the script cart was embossed with clear, sparkly embossing powder, much like the frame was done for the background panel. After the scripty hello was attached to the shadow, it was adhered to the background. A secondary sentiment from Simon Says Stamps, Say It All Friend, was stamped on cotton candy cardstock using Distress Oxide ink, worn lipstick. The sentiment was die cut with Simon Says Stamps sentiment labels. This small panel was then edged lightly with wilted violet and attached to the panel. A little bit of smudging was fixed up with one of my favorite tools, the Creative Detailer. And that wraps up this series of 5 cards featuring sentiment die cuts from Simon Says Stamp on backgrounds created with Distress Oxide inks. Thank you so much for your visit today.